All right, here's one from one of my buddies. It says, hello, sir. I'd love to hear if you have any leadership advice for newly commissioned officers. For example, I did a direct to commissioning and have no prior service. So I would love to hear your perspective on some do's and don'ts. This is an amazing question, and the fact that you're asking it already says so much. The fact that you're asking it now tells me you're probably not going to have some of these problems. So for those of you that are not aware, the military is essentially broken up into two segments, and this is all of the branches. There are the officers, and then there are the enlisted. The officers have essentially administrative authority over all of the enlisted. And all that's required for you to qualify to become an officer is that you have to have a 4-year college degree. And then you have to go through the basic officer training for whatever branch of service you're signing up for. So for the Marine Corps, that would be like OCS, which is Officer Candidate School, and TBS, the basic school. And once you get through those, you are now an officer. So what typically happens is an officer will go through their basic schooling and their job training, and they'll come out of their schooling as a second lieutenant or a first lieutenant, and then they will be assigned to a company of, we'll say, military police. And so they'll either be like the executive officer or the commanding officer of the company, and they are in charge of a huge group of personnel. With that authority, they often perceive that they deserve a high degree of respect. And one of the things that we will say in the military is, I'll respect the rank, but not the person. And I've heard that, and I've said that. So here is where the rub lies. Respect is earned. Authority is granted. So you may come out of all of your training with authority over a large group of people, but if you want to lead them, if you want to be their leader, and if you want to have any influence on them, you need to earn their respect. And I think you know this, but this is just advice to anybody going through this process. Respect is always earned, and it's earned through selflessness. It's earned through you getting out there with your men and getting dirty with them. If they got to fill sandbags, if you get out there and fill some sandbags with them, it goes a long way. Now, I have a little bit of experience with this because my first 4 years of being in the Marine Corps, I was a garrison K-9 military policeman. And so I had a military working dog. I did like narcotic interdiction. I worked with like the SWAT teams, and we did like manhunts and worked with investigations and that kind of stuff. I did not deploy, even though I volunteered to deploy on a number of occasions because I had a drug dog. They said, no, we need your dog here in the States. We need bomb dogs overseas. So I never deployed my first 4 years. I got out in 2005, and I got recalled back into the service for the surge, Operation Iraqi Freedom. I went to Fallujah. When I got out of the Marine Corps my first time, I left as a corporal in E4. But I had like 30 days of, we'll call vacation time built up, terminal leave. And in that 30-day block of time, I got a letter from the Marine Corps, and it was my promotion to sergeant. I was in E5, and I had just gotten out before they could actually pin me on at my station. So 2006 rolls around, and I get recalled for service. And I join up with my guys. I meet them in March of 2007 at Camp Lejeune, and I am a sergeant. I am a squad leader. I'm in charge of 12 or 13 guys, and I've never deployed. But a bunch of my guys had. So I had to lean on them for advice and for guidance and to learn my job better. I was in charge of them. I had authority over them, but I didn't have the respect yet, and I didn't really know my job that well, and I had to lean on them and some of my superiors who had all deployed before so that I could really be the leader I needed to be. And big shout out to my corporals that were with me and my staff sergeant. Really, really helped me a lot and did more for my leadership development than I could ever do on my own. Now, my advice to you on this is, as a new officer going in as the executive officer or commanding officer of a company or wherever you land, you're going to have enlisted men around you. The enlisted guys are kind of the workers. They're the grunts. They're the ones that are in the trenches doing the work. Lean on them to help you make good decisions. Now, you will ultimately have the final word. You have the final authority, but by leaning on them, you're going to make better choices and you're going to build their respect. Now, this is a slippery slope that I had a hard time with as I was going through my learning process. There came a point in time during my deployment when I went to my staff sergeant, the guy who was in charge of me. We'll call him Skinny, was his nickname. And I said, Skinny, I didn't call him Skinny. I said, hey, staff sergeant, I feel like maybe some of my guys are losing some respect for me. And I feel like I'm trying to make the right decisions and I'm having them help me out, but I feel like they're losing some respect for me as well. And he's like, well, I think they are. You're leaning on them too much and it's making you look incompetent. It's making you look like you really don't know what you're doing. He's like, you've learned a lot. Now you have to trust yourself and you have to make good decisions. And you do have the final word. You're the sergeant, you're in charge. Lean on them, but not too much. And that's the hard part. That's the part that's kind of tricky, is figuring out where that line is for you. So those would be my upfront do's and don'ts, is lean on your guys, get in the dirt with them, understand that you have the final authority and you got to earn their respect. If this is something that you guys like, go ahead and let me know. Do the subscribe thing. If there is something that you want me to talk about, if you have a question for me, drop it in the comments below. And until next time, make today great.